One of my frustrations with my voice and my ability to present is that I've done hundreds of podcasts, hundreds of audio presentations, hundreds of videos, yet the retention of these presentations is actually pretty low. I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations, and while I communicate regularly and do presentations, I find that the audience can't keep up. Now, is it the problem that the audience can't keep up, or is it my speaking tone and approach doesn't keep them engaged? So let's explore this. Many of the subscribers to Inside Strategic Relations want to be more persuasive, and they find themselves in front of audiences with opportunities to speak, yet they don't feel confident, they don't see the engagement with the audience, and then even sometimes after the presentation, people will ask questions that you addressed in the presentation. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that something about your delivery wasn't clean or clear. Now, there's artificial intelligence tools available now that will listen to your audio recording. It'll pick up tone, inflection, rate of pauses, and give you adequate feedback to improve your speaking. Now, I've also used Toastmasters International and was very active in that program. And of course, presenting more helps you better organize ideas and deliver content of interest. But here's the key. In a world of media where you can reach hundreds and thousands of people, how do you use your voice to connect with the right people, with the right message, and then call them to action so that they can become engaged in an appropriate way? Most social media today is really about just clout. And clout is where you're just recognized, people give you a thumbs up, they subscribe, like, all that kind of thing. You'll see a lot of YouTubers kind of begging for their likes and subscribes. I've been podcasting for probably 19 years now, and I've created audio for subscribers, general public. I've done training presentations, and throughout this activity, I have tried to improve my ability to speak. Now, here's the challenge, is that I am not the best judge of what I'm doing. So actually, while I'm doing this presentation right now, I have an app on my iPhone that is reviewing what I'm doing. Like it just said good pace. It said I use the word so too often. It's giving me real-time feedback, and I'm trying to use this in order to improve my ability to speak while sharing an episode with tips and ideas on how to improve to speak. So the number one tip is use of tools. Now, here's a challenge with tools. Many tools drive you to have communications patterns that are appropriate for the broadest audience, yet your target audience wants a specific pattern. So many of my subscribers, especially the paying subscribers, are okay with my faster pace of speech because they'll slow down the audio, or they want the message quickly rather than having it drawn out. They don't want the teaser. They don't want the hype that is very often necessary to be kind of an entertainment value on a social media platform. My content is delivered on YouTube, BitChute, Odyssey, podcasts, all kinds of platforms. And actually, I'm just noticing that this AI tool keeps picking up filler words that actually are not in my language or wording. So I'll have to listen to the audio to see. But here's the point. If you want this AI tool, I can't look at the screen. Okay, so I'm not going to look at the screen. I'm just going to continue the recording. The key here is if you want to improve your speaking, you have to remove the distractions that keep you from speaking. And one such distraction is self-talk and worrying too much about the audience's acceptance of your message. Now, self-talk is going to slow you down because you're going to say like, oh, I'm not sure if I'm saying the right thing. You might self-edit. And this is a big thing today, especially with the cancel culture. I want you to make sure that you're in front of audiences that are predisposed to listen to you and benefit from your communications. And publishing things on the general internet or on just broadcast messages is not the most appropriate place. The majority of my meaningful and high value conversations are done without any recording. They're done on private platforms or communications, might be a conference call, for example, and they're done with a very specific audience in mind. And so that presentation, if it was recorded, which a lot of my presentations are recorded, if that presentation got to a third party, it could actually be seen as offensive. It might be seen as nonchalant or not appropriate in the sense of context, because again, I'm speaking to a knowledgeable audience who is specifically, most of the time, hired me to come in and solve a problem. And then we may speak about nuances. Knowing it's recorded, we may speak about nuances that deliberately leave out information. So if you're self-editing or you have self-talk about your presentation that is not enhancing the context or value of the communications, then you've got to stop it. Now, here are some ways to stop it. You can use note cards. You can outline your presentation in advance. You can ultimately come up with a kind of an approach, or what are the key points you want to deliver. Another factor to consider is how fast you speak. Now, one of the challenges I have is that when I get excited about a topic, I'll speak very, very fast. I can speak 175 words a minute, and very often when I'm doing transcriptions, I'll have an outline on a whiteboard in front of me, and I'll just go. Because a transcription service can turn your words into text at whatever rate of speed that you're speaking. However, reusing that audio in a podcast or a presentation, there comes to be some problems. That audio is too quick for a human listener, perfect for an AI or perfect for a transcription service because they can slow down the audio. But I am now training myself to speak quickly when that is not appropriate for all audiences. So sometimes my excitement needs to be turned into inflection. That's the sing-song of voice. And often the use of dramatic pauses can give my listener time to catch up. So it's very important to be able to communicate with words that are appropriate for your audience. If I'm speaking to an audience of prospects who have not invested in being a customer or a private client, I want to focus with them using clear, open tones, slow pacing, dramatic pauses, relevant examples, but tying them into the action of engaging into a product or service rather than simply entertaining them. The entertainment is important. That's something I'm working on myself. But that audience of prospects needs something to solve a problem, but the problem that I want to solve for them is their inaction. So they need to acknowledge there's a problem. They need to get some ideas to define the problem and start developing a solution, and then ultimately move to the next step where we can go in depth into their specific problem, and then ultimately that's a different audience. So the conversation in a discovery call or a consultation is going to be more nuanced and focused to these individuals on the call, as well as have a lot more background research specific to this audience. And so that's a different pacing, that's a different tone. And in that presentation, I can speak a little faster, but we just have to remember when you speak fast, you can create anxiety in the listener. If you want to connect in a consultation, then you speak less. So the rate and pace might be the same, but you're going to speak less because you're inviting the person to share their point of view, to share their concerns, and then you're going to primarily listen. If you've listened well towards the end of the conversation, you can then prescribe the next step. Now, the third category that I work with frequently is actually a private client, and I might create materials for a private client where I'm speaking very quickly and I'm moving along very fast, and then ultimately it's being transcribed by a computer system or transcribed by a transcriptionist because the customer doesn't want the audio presentation. The customer wants the written materials because we've developed a plan. So we've talked about the general problem with the broad audience. We talk about their specific problem in the consultation, and then we focus only on the solution most relevant for their unique case in the consultation or paid engagement. I'm sharing this with you because it's very important. The people in these three segments are pretty much the same people. However, their intention and desire for being engaged in the communications is completely different between each of these three phases. A prospect is looking for options or opportunities, so you can give them a lot of ideas and a lot of concepts and help them relate to the problem, and they're fine with that. Somebody in a discovery call is trying to determine whether or not you're qualified to help them and whether or not they can afford the solution, so the nuance of that conversation is different. And then finally, when you're producing deliverables, you're going to have statements of work, you're going to have outlines, you're going to have a proposal maybe or a sales letter that you're building off of. It's very specific for their needs, and then the implementation of that work is more important. So instead of a narrative in a client engagement, I may actually provide a procedural or a multiple steps to do an activity. So here's the bigger picture. If you want to better communicate, you must be mindful of your audience and the context in which that audience wants to receive your insights. Number two is you want to make sure that you're connecting with that audience in a medium where they're open to receiving insights. So a lot of my podcasts end up on YouTube. I have very low expectations for YouTube because YouTube is primarily about entertainment, and I have to get somebody off of YouTube to my website in order to help them with education or to help them with actually solving problems. The entertainment element is important because we have to keep our audience's attention. There are so many distractions these days. Like I say, there are boobs on the internet, and from our birth till our death, we're always interested in milk and boobs. My point is that to keep the attention of an adult in a world where there's devices, where there's an AI thing flashing crap up on the screen, you really must be relevant. You have to be extremely relevant. You have to be entertaining. You have to connect. You have to tell jokes if you can. And those are things that I'm working on. Now, there are other elements of clear communications. Again, you will always speak better with an outline or at least a big idea statement that you're building off of. You'll do better with lists versus just rambling on like I do sometimes. But ultimately, are you speaking on purpose? So does that presentation have value to that audience, but then lead that audience to an engagement that refunds the time, effort, and attention it took to put in? Unfortunately, social media platforms have taught people just to go online and say something, or to go online and shake their booty. And this is not cultivating the advancement of humankind. This is not creating opportunities for connection. This is feeding animal lusts. And this works for these platforms because they sell advertising. So you got to think about this. If you're going to buy advertising on these platforms, what is the audience really intending to do? And then finally, how do you break that trance that these people are in to get entertainment? Or are there other mediums where you can reach people in a more appropriate manner? So you're on the right path to use communications, verbal communications, standing in front of an audience, using these modalities to connect with people. But you want to make sure that you don't fall for the siren song of these specific platforms that are being hyped up because essentially they're advertising platforms. And instead, find those audiences, segment those audiences, and go directly to the audience in the manner which is most appropriate to them. Don't worry about your sound of your voice. Most people don't like the sound of their own voice. Don't worry whether you look right or not. Just look the way you look and look professional. And finally, don't worry about if you're going to offend people. There's always people to be offended. The connection of your audience, connecting with the right people, you're still going to offend people. So just be honest, be sincere, be helpful, but ultimately focus on what's the next step. You want the audience to do something. We don't speak for our own gratification, even though society kind of gives you dopamine hits for speaking for your own gratification. I do these podcasts for an audience of people. I've researched that audience. I interact with that audience. I want to make sure that the audience, when they spend 15 minutes with me on a podcast, gets something of value. Now, of course, I can't cover everything in 15 minutes. So if you do have questions about what I've shared here today, maybe you have feedback and suggestions on how my presentations could be more attainable for those who are high-income professionals and entrepreneurs who want to build better business relationships, then I'm open to that. You can actually reach me at www.insidestrategicrelations.com. Go to the contact page, and you can ask your questions there. We also have a free newsletter and hundreds of podcast episodes. I would invite you to come join us. I invite you to work on these skills, especially the items that we've talked about today. And even if you never share the audio recording with anybody, go ahead and record yourself doing presentations and then listen to it. Listen to it with an open mind and a notepad, and try to see it from the audience's perspective and write down things you can improve. You don't think about these things to improve when you're doing the presentation, but you write them down. And then also, before you do your presentation, you want to make sure that you're building out audience profiles, building out an outline. And if you want specific help with that, I'm Justin Hitt from Inside Strategic Relations, and you can ask for that help either through our 12 months results-based coaching program, or simply by visiting www.insidestrategicrelations.com, going to the contact page, and asking for the help that you need. We're here to help. We get results for clients, and ultimately we're here to help you transform business relationships into profits, guaranteed. I'll see you on the next podcast. Thanks for listening.